let's talk about Pearl Square. What's the vision for that project and why does it matter for Jacksonville?
So really, Pearl Square is going to be the neighborhood that defines downtown Jacksonville. So downtown Jacksonville, the perception is stop and go. There's nothing going on. And again, that lack of momentum has actually created a development team that's parceled 30 blocks of downtown Jacksonville together.
So how did you first get into commercial real estate and what drew you toward retail?
Yeah, so I started at a really small firm. I was the first broker hired, which was probably a blessing and a curse to begin with. Ultimately, out of that, I took on whatever I could get. And at the time, a lot of what I could get was urban kind of infill projects and then really kind of these retail nodes in the historic markets surrounding downtown. And ultimately, my passion for retail really developed with those kind of historic vignettes of kind of retail strips that were ultimately empty at the time. And it really, my passion for retail started there because you really started to see what the impact of retail could be on a neighborhood.
Right.
And how really thoughtful merchandising, really created a sense of community, from a developer side, really helped with the rents. I mean, I saw rents increase by 300% in those neighborhoods just by merchandising them, and getting some first movers to those neighborhoods. And so ultimately that's really what led me to focusing on mixed use density and the retail component in projects like that.
Yeah. So what's kept you in the Jacksonville market? What makes Jacksonville so interesting to you?
Yeah, candidly, it's funny. So I really started to make a name for myself with this product type probably like 6 or 7 years ago. At that point, I was talking to my mentors and saying, Miami, what about Atlanta? What about, going back to the Northeast to Boston? And a lot of my mentors said, you're a big fish in a small pond and you should stay exactly where you are. Ultimately, now we're working on $4 billion worth of mixed use real estate in Jacksonville. And so they were right. But what keeps me here, I believe that Jacksonville is one of the best kept secrets in the Southeast. I think that we are at a tipping point of development, of commerce. And I think that, ultimately we're about to really see Jacksonville shine, and our slow progress as a city, I think, has almost been a blessing. Because here we are, fast forward to 2025, and I think we've learned a lot of lessons from a lot of other cities. And so we are implementing those lessons in the development of Jacksonville. Ultimately is why I believe that we're at this tipping point. We're about to kind of go over that point.
To follow up on that, I mean, Jacksonville's obviously growing fast, but it doesn't get top billing always with new brands. So what do people outside the market, what do they get wrong or what do they learn once they get there?
It's a little bit of a perception problem. I think that it's just, we're the redheaded stepchild of Florida, right? Again, we're not that shiny city. And ultimately, I just think that it's getting people here. It's getting the retailers here. It's getting the master brokers here. Because I think that when they do discover Jacksonville, I drive people through neighborhoods and they say this looks like Coral Gables or this looks like this neighborhood. And so
right.
They can kind of see it. Ultimately, I think that's what it is. I mean, we're the largest city in the United States. We've got more shoreline in the city than any other city in the United States between the Intercoastal, the ocean, the St. Johns River. So really kind of discovering how everything lays out and fits together. And I say this all the time. It's like really tough to look at Jacksonville from a 1-3-5 mile radius standpoint. You really got to dive into how everything lays out, how everything communicates together. And ultimately, I think, that's what people get wrong is really, the biggest thing is not coming to market to really understand how the market works.
Right. Yeah, because St. John's, at least for the specialty brands, right, not the other categories, a lot of the specialty brands are, thinking, hey, that's my first choice, but not always sure about what the alternatives are, right?
Right.
Yeah. What what are you seeing right now in terms of like category demand? So the what categories or even specific brands are most interested right now in Jacksonville? Is it all categories, or is there one particular in retail real estate that seems like Jacksonville's on their radar the most right now?
Yeah, I would say the ones that we're probably coming into contact with the most, that I think are figuring out other retail nodes, including some of the ones that we work on, are, really kind of more of that contemporary retail, soft goods, clothing, smaller boutiques, higher end luxury fashion, that mid luxury fashion. And then I would say, there's a home furnishing section that I think is a higher end furnishing, group that is starting to figure out Jacksonville and where they're going to land. Where are the different trade areas from an interior designer standpoint? That they kind of want to be close to. So I would say those are the two big categories that are really trying to figure out Jacksonville as a whole and kind of where they're going to land.
Yeah. Tell us just briefly, about kind of the key submarkets, in Jacksonville, and what's the one you think that's, ready to go to the next level?
Yeah, so I think that there's really three big projects that I think a lot of these groups are paying attention to in Jacksonville. So you've got Regency Centers, who's doing the southeast quadrant of 295 and JTB, which is the opposite quadrant of the St. John's Town Center. They're doing a large project called Seven Pines. So I think a lot of retail is gravitating there, trying to take some of the momentum of St. John's Town Center and just the trade area in general. We see Durbin Park is a really strong kind of retail epicenter right now, with all of the success and, migration to St. Johns County. So that's really nice and central to a lot of the popular neighborhoods in St. Johns County. And then we think that Pearl Square, which is obviously a project we'll get into more detail, is really that project that sits around all of the affluent historic neighborhoods, and is ultimately going to create that neighborhood environment for downtown Jacksonville. And we're seeing a lot of great retail, looking at that project as well.
So let's talk about Pearl Square. What's the vision for that project, and why does it matter for Jacksonville?
So really, Pearl Square is going to be the neighborhood that defines downtown Jacksonville. So downtown Jacksonville, the perception is, it's stop and go. There's nothing going on. And again, that lack of momentum has actually, created a development team that's parceled 30 blocks of downtown Jacksonville together. The first phase is a $750 million plus investment. 9 blocks will be coming out of the ground simultaneously to really create that density. It's about 2 million square feet. 1,250 multifamily units. We're working with the Morris Ashmeys, the Elkis Manfredis of the world on the design. And ultimately, I think that this is the neighborhood that is going to define Jacksonville, because everybody comes and visits Jacksonville. They go to a sporting event. They come here for business, and there's really nothing happening. And so, this project with its mix of food and beverage and soft goods and hotels and residential, I think is really what is going to define downtown Jacksonville. And then you couple that with $500 million in public infrastructure and park systems that are going to connect to the project. You couple that with the Four Seasons residential and hotel, which is coming out of the ground, the new $1.4 billion stadium, which is under construction, the 22-acre University of Florida campus, tech and grad campus that'll connect to the development. I think that, all of this is ultimately what is going to define Jacksonville's brand moving forward, and why it's such an influential project.
Tell me about phase one of the retail that you're working on, and so tell me a little bit about that. What are the brands and tenants you're targeting for that initial phase?
We've got about 300,000 square feet of retail. We have really great food and beverage coming into the project. Steve Palmer with Indigo Road is going to be doing our hotel and a couple of his concepts within the district. And so he's really an early sign on to the project and a big advocate. So we've got some other food and beverage groups that again, we are looking for groups that feel authentic, right? And also will be a driver for people in Ponte Vedra who are coming into town, trying to drive people from Fleming Island and Amelia, and then also support kind of the historic neighborhoods around it from a food and beverage standpoint. And then something that's been a surprise, I think, to the development team, which we've been saying all along, is the soft goods. So there's been a lot of traction with the soft goods on the home furnishing side. We have a lot of groups that we're working with there, and then on the fashion side of things, we are finding groups that are looking outside of St. John's Town Center again for what is next, and they're starting to land in our project. And I think a lot of that has to do with a lot of attention to the public realm, the amazing architects and architecture that's going to define the project. This is not going to look like a typical project for Jacksonville. It looks much more Soho-esque, and really we feel like it's a mixture of, and again, a lot of this development team, came from Water Street, Tampa, came from DC, and really it's starting to feel like a mix of Water Street and Hyde Park Village. And so that's why we're really getting excited about where the ground floor is going, and the momentum that we're starting to see with the retailers.
Matt, tell me just a little bit about the group, your team, and what else you guys focus on apart from project leasing. Just give me a little bit of a snippet of, tell me about your group.
Yeah, so I 5 years ago I came to Colliers International, started the urban division. So really it's a group, myself, Olivia Steineman, and Sam Middlecoff, who really focus on projects with density, walkability, and we like to be partners with the developer very early on while they're working on their merchandising plan, while they're in design on the public realm. I think what makes our team special is not only do we have the relationships with the soft goods and the national retail master brokers, but we spend a lot of time out of market. I think we hit up 19 cities last year in a span of like 3 weeks. And ultimately, our goal there was meeting with independent restaurant groups, restaurateurs that have a presence in the Southeast and on the East Coast, and really getting an understanding how they work so that when we do start to work on projects like this, we have the ability not only to grab those national retail brands, but really those food and beverage brands that I call them the umami of a project, that are so good they make you really want to keep coming back. So that's a huge focus of ours is really finding these groups. And I use Ariat Hospitality, out of Coconut Grove in Miami, Michelin star group. In our travels, met with Chef Beltran, and we signed a 10,000 square foot lease in downtown Jacksonville just recently. And again, I think that's because we spend the time out of market to really understand new concepts and new food and beverage, and educate them on Jacksonville and get them here. And ultimately, we hope to be doing this in other markets throughout the Southeast.
Well, yeah. So, any retail trends that you're watching, heading into next year for Jacksonville specifically?
Listen, I think that, Jacksonville is the strip mall, open air mall capital of the Southeast. And I think we are finally getting sophisticated developers here. Not to say we haven't had sophisticated developers, but more sophisticated developers on the mixed use side of things. And I really think that there are going to be some mixed use projects coming out of the ground that are really going to start to define Jacksonville as a brand. And I do think that is a trend going into the next few years.
Yeah. So, obviously with all the growth, all the new projects and everything, are there some brands on your wish list or emerging brands or, existing brands that you really think are a good fit for Jacksonville that in 24 months we're going to see opening in the market?
Yeah, listen. So I mean, obviously I have a wish list of brands that I'd like to see that aren't necessarily new to the Southeast. I mean, it's like, would love to see the Todd Snyders of the world, the Reformations of the world, from a high-end furnishing, the Design Within Reaches, the Shade Stores, the Farrow and Balls. I think are kind of a mix that we're looking for. And then from who we kind of want to start to see in the Southeast, I mean, I'm fascinated by all the European brands starting to kind of break into the US. I love the ASOS, the Saisons, the Mangoes of the world, kind of coming into markets, and kind of this sustainable fashion. I use LA Relaxed as an example out of Los Angeles as a great brand that I hope to see continue to expand in the United States and eventually in Florida, because I do think that athleisure, that sustainability, I think is really big.
Yeah, great. So you recently joined Brand March as a feature broker. What attracted you to the platform?
I'm always looking for a group to collaborate with that is like-minded. And I think, I'm going to use the Automatic conference as an example. It happens to put together kind of the creatives, I think, of our industry into one conference, right? And I look at Brand March being similar to that in an online social platform where it's a curated mix of really great brokers and really great retailers that want to collaborate and do really amazing work for these projects that we're working on. And so, I think that it's going to be a great resource for the collaboration of the brokerage community that's really in this kind of creative contemporary retail environment.